Geopolitics depends on geography, and when geography changes, geopolitics doesn't gently adapt, it revolutionizes. 500 years ago, Europeans gained real access to Africa and the Americas. Trade routes shifted, wealth shifted, military power shifted. The world order moved from older centers towards the Atlantic world. Today, we're at the start of another geographic shift. Not in the south, but at the very top of the world, the Arctic. For most of human history, the Arctic was a hard limit. Too cold, too remote, too expensive, too dangerous. A natural wall on the map. And that wall is now cracking. Less ice, longer summers, more access. And when a region becomes accessible, it becomes geopolitical. Welcome to Geopolitics by Luka Juri. In this episode 1 of a 3-part mini-series on the Arctic. In this first episode, we set up the big picture. In episodes 2 and 3, we answer the toughest questions and look at the consequences. Here is the core idea for this whole series. When a region becomes accessible, it becomes contested. And when it becomes contested, it becomes central to geopolitics. The Arctic is no longer just ice and polar bears. It is turning into ports, shipping lanes, military bases, energy projects, data cables, and radar stations. And that changes everything. Let's start with the basic reality. The Arctic is warming faster than the global average. Sea ice is shrinking. Permafrost is thawing, destabilizing the ground under buildings, roads, and pipelines. In simple terms, what was locked away for thousands of years is becoming reachable. New sea routes are opening for part of the year. Resources that were unreachable are moving into play. So the key question is not just, is the Arctic melting? The real geopolitical question is, what happens when a region that used to block human activity begins to enable it? What happens when the top of the world stops being a frozen barrier and starts becoming a usable corridor? To understand why this matters, let's go back to the age of discovery. When Europeans reached the Americas and navigated around Africa, the physical map didn't change. The continents stayed where they were, but access changed. Once those routes opened, new trade networks appeared, new empires rose. Old powers rooted in the old geography declined. The center of gravity shifted to those who could control the new routes and the new spaces. Now, apply that logic to the Arctic. If the Arctic becomes a reliable route between Asia, Europe, and North America, if it becomes a major source of energy, minerals, and rare earth elements, if it becomes a forward operating zone for missiles, submarines, and early warning systems, then power will shift again. Not overnight, but over decades. Emerging geography means emerging winners and emerging losers. There is another myth we need to kill early. The Arctic is not empty. On the map, you see ice and ocean. In reality, you have national territories, exclusive economic zones, indigenous homelands, energy fields, mineral deposits, shipping lanes, and military infrastructure. And above all, you have states with interests. The main Arctic coastal states are Russia, the United States, Canada, Denmark through Greenland, Norway. But they are not alone. You also have powerful near-Arctic or external actors. The European Union somehow, definitely China, which presents itself as a near-Arctic actor and wants long-term access. India, which is building an Arctic profile through science and partnerships. Each of these actors look at the Arctic and see something different. Russia sees a strategic backyard and an economic lifeline. The United States sees homeland defense and great power competition. Canada sees sovereignty, especially over the Northwest Passage. Europe sees a vulnerable northern flank and a complicated balance between climate goals and security realities. China sees future shipping leverage, energy access, and strategic influence. India sees science, connectivity, and strategic autonomy. Different visions, but same space. That is the definition of a geopolitical hotspot in the making. So, in this first episode, the goal is not to answer everything, it is to pose the right questions. Questions that will guide episodes 2 and 3. Here are the 4 questions that together define the Arctic game. Question 1. Who actually controls the Arctic? Not on paper, in practice. Control is not just drawing lines on a map, it is capability. Who can operate there all the year? Who has the icebreakers to move and escort ships? Who has the submarines, bases, satellites, and sensors? Who can project force if it comes to that? In episode 2, we'll look at the real balance of power, why Russia is so far ahead, why the United States is scrambling to catch up, and how others are trying to carve out some space. Question 2. Why is the United States so focused on Greenland? On a map, Greenland looks like a giant block of ice, but in strategy it is leverage. It sits on the gateway between the Arctic and the North Atlantic. It hosts critical early warning and space tracking infrastructure. And it has major deposits of minerals that matter for modern technology. In episode 2, we'll unpack the Greenland question, what Washington wants, what Copenhagen and Nuuk want, and how Greenland fits in the broader Arctic competition. Question 3. Are Russia and China allies in the Arctic or uneasy partners? They cooperate because they need each other. Energy projects, shipping, diplomacy, and sometimes joint activity. But they also compete because power sharing in strategic regions is never comfortable. Russia worries about influence and control. China wants access, but also wants flexibility. In episode 2, we go inside this relationship, where cooperation is real, where it is tactical, and where competition may grow. And question 4, what are they all fighting for and what could go wrong? The obvious answers are resources and routes, energy reserves, critical minerals, and shorter shipping paths. But the deeper answer includes ecological risk and climate feedback loops. More shipping can mean more emissions and more pressure on fragile ecosystems. More infrastructure on thawing ground can mean more accidents. More drilling and mining can raise the odds of spills and long-term contamination. And none of that stays in the Arctic alone. It affects weather, sea levels, food systems, and global stability. In episode 3, we connect the Arctic race to its global consequences, from trade and technology to climate and coastal cities worldwide. So here's the message of this first episode. Geography is not static in geopolitics. When access changes, power changes. The Arctic is crossing that threshold right now. From wall to corridor, from blank space to strategic space. In episode 2, we move from questions to power. Who has the capabilities to shape this new geography? In episode 3, we move from power to consequences. What is at stake for states, for markets, for the climate, and ultimately for all of us? If you want the answers, subscribe and turn on notifications. And in the comments, tell me which of the 4 questions is the most urgent for you. Because the Arctic is no longer the edge of the map. It may be the place where the next geopolitical revolution begins.